Hey everyone, I'm Ryan Nix.
And this is Brittany.
And this is Pure Malice. A true crime podcast.
The information shared in this podcast or on this website is for informational and entertainment purposes only. The host will not be held responsible for any misled interpretations of the content. The opinions and views expressed are those of the host and guest and should not be considered advice. We cannot guarantee the accuracy of any statements from guests or the sufficiency of the information.
Self-care isn't just a luxury, it's a necessity. At Vital Flow Aesthetics and Wellness, they believe in helping you look and feel your absolute best. Whether you're looking for a rejuvenating medical-grade facial, Botox, fillers, or help on your weight loss journey, their expert team is there to enhance your natural beauty with personalized care. Ready to glow from the inside out? Book your appointment today at Vital Flow Aesthetics and Wellness and experience the confidence you deserve. Located inside Tejas Urgent Care in Mejia, Texas. Call or text now to book your appointment at 254-310-7131. Again, that's 254-310-7131.
On this week's episode, we're going to be talking about the Eastern State Penitentiary. Many of you have probably heard about it, seen it. I know it's been on an episode of Ghost Adventures. But the whole point of the Eastern State Penitentiary was it was supposed to be a solution for harsh prison conditions. Apparently, the inmates in Philadelphia suffered quite a bit when they were placed in penitentiaries. And so this was a solution.
Dr. Benjamin Rush founded the Philadelphia Society for Alleviating the Miseries of Public Prisons in 1787. It's like a mouthful for a name.
Dr. Benjamin Rush.
I
wonder if he rushed them in.
Probably not.
Yeah, probably not. So back to his whole point of this, his mission was prison reform. And this was the first prison reform in the world, especially at this time. So, in 1821, Pennsylvania legislature approved funding for a true penitentiary. They got 12 acres of land, $800,000 to build it. They even held a contest to see who would get to, design and build it.
And just real quick, this was the world's first penitentiary.
So the very first one ever. So they had a contest where architects were able to present and compete for best design. And the winner ended up being John Haviland.
So his blueprint laid out a wagon wheel-shaped building with one central building in the middle, 7 cell blocks that came out from the center. The goal was to house 250 inmates here. And John's plan allowed for 256 prisoners total. Perfect, right? Right. But over the years, more and more inmates came into the prison, so they had to expand several times.
So the original construction was 1832, completed 4 years later in 1836. In order to expand blocks 4 through 7, they ended up becoming 2-story blocks because there were so many inmates. The building was intentionally built on a hill 2 miles outside of the city. The town was called Francisville. It was built on a hill so that everyone could see it. It was meant to be a reminder that it was not somewhere that you wanted to be.
It was a European castle-ish style building, which just adds to the creepy factor for the building. It ended up taking about 14 years to complete the original blueprint that was presented because of all the changes that they ended up making to allow for the amount of prisoners that they had coming in.
Yeah, so I guess the prisoners literally increased in the planning phases of this penitentiary. And back to the whole castle-ish style that is creepy, especially Pennsylvania, Transylvania, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I think of.
Yep, exactly.
On a hill, lightning strikes. This is not where you want to be. So 14 years from start to beginning of just the blueprint. Wow. 30-foot walls surrounded the building. They ended up having a 3-story administration building inside the building, which housed the warden's office, an intake facility, a laundromat, a kitchen, a hospital, and a place for the warden and his family to actually live on site.
Not a place I'd want to live as a warden, having your family there living in a prison, not for me. But.
Right. So it was not only the first of its kind, it was also the last. So, The system they were going to use in the prison, it was referred to as the Pennsylvania system, also known as the separate system. It was supposed to bring out the inner light of inmate. Basically, how they wanted it to work was it would be silent at all times in the prison. No talking, no whispering, no singing, no sounds at all, silent. So, I mean, we know, like, studies show solitary confinement, no, talking,
Hmm.
no interaction, no social I mean, even in, like, you look at the hierarchy of life. What is it? Glasgow's no, not Glasgow's, that's wrong, sorry.
Hold. We're gonna look it up.
Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You have physiological needs, water, food, shelter. But then at some point up that pyramid comes love and belonging, friendship, intimacy, family, a sense of connection. So,
Hmm.
I mean, just honestly, and I mean, part of it is probably the times, the study in psychology, all of
Absolutely.
the above, right? But I mean, it was really meant to fail from the beginning. They literally weren't going to let them talk.
Definitely set up to fail.
Yeah, so each inmate was to stay in their cell 24 hours a day, other than 2 times a day when they were released in their own yard for 30 minutes, and then they were out of their cell for 1 hour total each day. Everyone had a cell neighbor, so it was impossible for them to exercise at the same time while also still maintaining the silence rule. So anytime an inmate left their cell, they had a hood over their head. Again, like, what the heck? I
Yeah.
mean, let's drive them to insanity. In fact, I was, like, just reading a study yesterday about solitary confinement because I was looking at another true crime. It was the very first woman she was in Tennessee, the very first woman in the United States that was sentenced to I don't know if it was the very first, maybe it was the youngest woman. Anyways, that was sentenced to the death penalty,
Hmm.
and so her sentencing was literally solitary confinement, and then she was supposed to be executed by electrocution in 1996 or 97. Anyway, she's still alive from what I read yesterday, but they were talking about the studies they've done even in that amount of time, so we're just talking in the last 30 years.
Yeah, about 30.
Okay, I'm just old. So 30 years, they've found even more evidence. Like, all researching parties, like, unanimously agreed that solitary confinement is one of the harshest forms of punishment psychologically because it literally leads to insanity. So, yeah, maybe it started off as a penitentiary and it ended as an insane asylum. Ooh. So they try to spin this, right? They try to put it out there as, like, a positive thing, saying that if no one sees you in prison, no one can ever know you were in prison. It was also a benefit for the guards because if there's a hood over, the inmates' heads each time they're removed from the cells, they're never gonna learn the prison layout, which helps prevent escaping convicts, riots, attacks. I would think to some point even recognizing the guards.
Yeah.
So, and most prison guards nowadays, I don't know about back then, but, they have uniforms, so unless you can literally recognize the size of someone's foot and the way that they walk, which is probably very recognizable
Yeah, once
after
you get used to
yeah, like,
seeing it.
especially if they work the same blocks
Mhm,
over and over and over,
mhm.
like, "Oh, it's not Bob, it's the guy that walks with the funny limp," you know? But either way, if the guy with the funny limp messes with you, I mean, you're gonna go after that guy, I would think, with the hood on or not.
Right.
Because, like, what do they have left to lose at this point? They literally don't even have an identity.
Once the inmate was finished in the yard with their allotted 30 minutes, the guard would check the yard to make sure that nothing was left behind. Then they would move out that inmate and bring in the next one. So inmates were fed 3 times a day, and they were actually fed really well in the beginning. Their cells didn't have a front door that led to the hallway where the guards were. Instead, there were slots, which is where the guards would pass their food through. They mostly ate meat and vegetables. They were allowed to have as many potatoes as they wanted to, apparently. And although the prison had indoor heating and plumbing, which is mind boggling because at this point, the president of the United States didn't even have those luxuries. But the only light that the inmate had were through skylights. So if you happen to live on block 1 through 3, which were the 1 story blocks, then you probably got a pretty decent amount of light during the day. But if you lived on blocks 4 through 7, then you weren't getting very much light at all because all of those upstairs cells had the skylights, and then the ones underneath it on the second floor, they would get whatever was left over, whatever could creep in. So they didn't have much light at all.
Yeah, and then you have to remember, block 4 through 7 was 2 stories, so they're not getting hardly well, especially the ones on the first floor, like, they're not
Right.
getting hardly any light. So, going back, I have a medical background, so everything, I literally can't help it. It just all goes to medical. I'm thinking, okay, vitamin D, even depression. I tell people that are depressed all the time, go take a walk. Start your day off with 10 minutes of sunshine. Go outside, start your day off with the sunrise and the sunshine and let the light hit you. Feel the light, feel the heat. So, on top of not being able to talk, taking your identity away, they literally took away sunlight, what nature has given them.
Mhm.
So, ultimately, like we said before, the goal of the prison reform was to send the inmates back into a world that was better and would create better human beings than whenever they came into the prison system. So, prisoners were taught different trades. They were taught things like cobbling, weaving, canning, and even given each other haircuts, okay? So, did they take the hood off for this? I don't know.
Right?
And I don't know, like, if you're gonna teach, and this is something else, like, that I can't understand how this went. How did they look over the fact that to be back in the community as a better person, you have to learn to communicate, right? You have to communicate with people,
Yeah,
and
you need those social interactions.
yeah, and everything listed here, cobbling, weaving, canning, well, maybe not canning, haircuts. You have to interact with somebody else and see what their needs are, and how are you gonna be marketable out in the world if you can't meet the needs of people that are supposed to be supporting you? I think that's probably still, an idea for today, but,
Right.
I mean, you can't communicate. Just it makes no sense. Anyways, when the penitentiary first opened, there was actually a barber in each cell block because their hair was supposed to be cut neat and short. When the inmates started cutting each other's hair, they were obviously watched closely, and the razors used for the haircuts were signed in and out to help prevent anyone from stealing them. So, crazy enough, nowadays, so my background is ER. Nowadays, the inmates are just given razors, like, they're just given them.
They really are?
Yeah, like, they can hold them POV, so I don't know what that means, like, personal on, I don't really know. Maybe that's not even the right word, but it's, like, personal, like, they can hold it in their possession.
They don't have to check them in and out.
Yeah, no, they just buy them I guess if they have the money, I don't really know how all this works, but
Yeah, like
I do know
commissary.
that they have them, and they're not always watched with them because I get multiple lacerations, so it's just really strange. So anyways, they say they were, watched closely, the razors were signed in and out, they were counted, eventually, the guards even got their haircuts by the inmates.
Mhm.
So, you know now just FYI here, so a little backstory. So when the penitentiary first opened, the inmates were mostly just petty crimes, so thieves, just, like, not
Yeah,
murderers,
not
like
hardcore criminals
yeah.
here.
But then the first prisoner, so that was Charles Williams, he was prisoner number 1. He was a burglar. He was a farmer by trade. His theft included one $20 watch, one $3 gold seal, and a gold key. He stole a $20 watch, which I don't know, back then a $20 watch was probably, like, way
Right, difference in the amount, yeah, for
but
sure.
but even now, so, like, let's bring it into today's world. I have no idea what the conversion rate is, so if you
Wait,
wanna
let me
make fun of me,
see.
that's fine.
I wanna
But, I mean, literally, I steal a $10,000 watch, and I'm not allowed to leave without a hood on my head. I can't talk to anybody. I get no sunlight. What? Crazy. Super crazy.
hold on one sec. It
It's
was $23?
$20 watch. So, for those petty crimes, so the $20 watch, a $3 gold seal, and a gold key, he was sentenced to 2 years of confinement with labor.
It's harsh.
Yeah.
Okay. The value of $23 in 1836 equals $3,438 in today's amount.
Yeah. Okay, I was super generous. I said $10,000.
Sorry, no, $100, not 23. $100 in 1836 was worth $3,400
Oh,
today.
okay. So that's like a
So a
fifth.
fifth of that.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. So eventually, things started getting rough. Weren't going as smooth as they thought it would. If you talked, you hummed, you broke the silence. That was mandatory. There were different punishments that you'd suffer. This started off as limiting exercise. So you wouldn't get your yard time. You wouldn't get your fresh air. They would take away food privileges. Well, extra food privileges. Okay. So you would get less potatoes than what you were used to, and eventually the punishments got worse and worse over time after power struggles and power shifts started to happen. There were cells that they used specifically for punishment, and those were called dark cells.
So again, you already didn't get a whole lot of light.
Yeah.
And then if you got in trouble, then you literally had 0 light at all, period.
Yeah. And so not only did they have zero light, it was painted. Like it was painted dark. So this was located on block 4. So it was on ground level. The prison skylight was covered, no light left at all. They were left in complete darkness, which we've already talked about can like mess with you. But now you don't know the time of the day. your sensory deprivation is completely out of whack,
Mhm.
right? Messes with your sight. Your mind's gonna start playing tricks on you. Now we get into the psychology of it. Are they gonna have psychotic break? Damien Eccles, he was kept in solitary for a ridiculous amount of time. All right.
And this is not here in this prison. This is just an example of another
Yeah.
case.
He's just an example, but he's a good example. Like, you can go Google Damien Eccles, see what happened to him, and just imagine how much worse it could be for all of these people. Now, they would probably, from what I understand, only kept one person in this cell at a time, and I'm not sure how many did we find out how many cells are like this? Is it just one, or is there more than one dark cell? So
We'll stumble upon it eventually.
okay. So most of the prisoners, they were left there for a time range of anywhere from a couple of weeks to a month. I feel like this is like life story. Like, every story starts off this way. Like, the punishments progressively got worse and worse, and then it turned into something called an iron gag. This was a metal brace the guards would put in the inmate's mouth. Some people said that it attached the tongue. There were chains that came from the brace and the mouth, and they would be chained to cuffs around your wrists, which were most likely and most often behind your back. Basically, the more you struggle to get out of it, the tighter the brace got around your tongue. And many times, inmates' tongues would rip open or they would die from injuries or infections caused by the iron gag.
That's a terrible.
Well, not only is that terrible, like, again, I'm spiraling back to the medical world. So, like, if you look at medical pictures and references from back in this day and age, like, they didn't wear gloves. They didn't have real sterile technique. So, can you imagine, like, an iron gag? Like, what do they do? Wash it off with water and bring it on to the next
So
person?
gross.
I mean, and especially like, oh, his tongue ripped off. Okay, let's move it to the next one. Like, we have one free.
It's terrible.
I mean, it's like, whoa, you know? So, on top of it just being a terrible mechanism of punishment, it's much deeper. I can imagine infection probably just raged through that place. Disgusting.
Yeah, it is gross. In 1835, there was an investigation into the death of an inmate from the iron gag, but eventually the prison guards were cleared and fully exonerated.
So wait, so, like, back to they were fully cleared
Mm.
and fully exonerated. So, I mean, so they're up on a hill, so and they're already, like, the whole idea behind this prison and the way it was reformed was, solitary confinement. I mean,
Complete isolation.
basically. So, what happened on the hill? Did it stay on the hill? Like,
Right.
like, what else happened? That how many deaths were there that were never ever investigated, or how many terrible things happened behind closed doors, or maybe publicly within the prison that just weren't talked about?
And we'll see as we go through this case how many times they were investigated and how many times they just got to keep on,
Yeah. And then, I start thinking like go deeper and deeper of all the terrible things. I'm sure there were inside clubs, and I'm not talking about like on the prisoner side. Like, I'm sure there were gangs or whatever, like within the prison somehow, some way. Because we all know that we've heard the stories about how they learn to communicate without communicating. So I'm sure that there were these systems in place, right? But then were there clubs or initiations for the guards themselves or higher administration? Like, so what was really going on? I mean, we'll never know, but it's just interesting to think about.
Yeah. They also started punishments of ice baths and exposure to the elements. In this punishment, an inmate would be forced into an ice bath, and guards would continue to pour buckets of ice and water on them. And I don't know if you've ever taken an ice bath. I know that Brittany and I both have. They're not fun.
No.
They hurt.
Yeah, they probably should have had really good skin.
Yeah.
I mean, like ice, like they're finding like ice like helps with circulation and hormone regulation and all of this weird stuff. But
Not
I
to the
mean,
extent these guys got it.
excessive. Okay, probably not. But I'm just saying,
Right.
if you were one of the few that got like the short term ice bath, maybe it did you good.
Maybe. We'll see.
Your
I don't know.
recovery time was better for all the lashings maybe that you took. I don't know. Come out whoop ass.
We'll see. Okay, so after the ice baths, the inmates would then be taken outside into winter conditions, naked, and left there until ice started to visibly form on certain parts of the body. In 1831, an inmate named Seneca Plinley endured the ice bath punishment, and he was released from the prison shortly after. He was considered incurably insane after this incident.
Was it just the ice bath, or was it the whole experience?
Well, right after that experience is whenever they released him due to that.
Oh, okay.
So, The next punishment that we're going to talk about is called the mad chair.
So I think the mad chair oh, no, 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 I'm thinking of a different penitentiary that had, like, a gas chair.
Oh,
So
yeah, no, this
so
wasn't that.
never mind.
So, nicknamed this because it caused inmates to go mad from being in it. You would be gagged and strapped to the chair so tightly that you would lose blood circulation over 24 to 48 hours. And some people say that there were instances where amputations were needed on inmates' limbs due to the mad chair.
Eee.
If you think about even just wrapping like rubber band around the end of your finger and how quickly that's gonna lose all
Mhm.
that circulation, 24 to 48 hours, that's a long time.
Well, and I can only imagine the hospital conditions within the prison.
Me too.
Whoa, yeah, let's go there for an amputation.
Yeah, no way.
Yeah,
No way, it
no.
was great. Another form of punishment was the straitjacket. They would put inmates in the straitjacket and gag them and then leave them alone in a dark cell for a few days or longer.
Eee. So in 1842, they allowed Charles Dickens, he's a famous author for those that don't know who that is, but he visited the prison and he was actually allowed to speak to some of the inmates. He became deeply depressed from his visit there and from seeing what was going on in the prison and that things were not being done the right way. He hated the solitary confinement idea. In a book that he wrote called American Notes, he wrote, "The system here is rigid, strict, and hopeless. Solitary confinement. I believe it and its effects to be cruel and wrong. I hold this slow and daily tampering with the mystery of the brain to be immeasurably worse than any torture of the body."
Mhm. I mean, he hit it on the head.
Yeah, he was clearly beyond his time.
Mhm.
So clearly, this prison and its harsh punishments, it left many inmates seeking a way out, right? So it did lead to many attempts of escape, with only one of those being successful.
Mhm.
So the very first prisoner that ever tried to escape was William Hamilton. He had been sentenced to the penitentiary in 1831 for pig theft,
Yeah.
which back then, I know,
Was a
like
big deal.
back then was it's way different, right? But for one reason or another, the warden at this time, he wanted William to be his personal waiter. And with William really having absolutely no say in this matter, that's exactly what he became. After 1 year of being in prison for pig theft, he was presented with an opportunity to escape. He was waiting for the warden and was left alone. He took a chance. He went to the roof where he lowered himself down to the front of the building and he escaped into the night. He successfully escaped, but he began stealing pigs almost immediately after his escape, and he ended up back in the penitentiary for the exact same thing he originally went in for.
Think about that, guys. Like, you just
Learn.
escaped, you have your freedom back, and literally the very next day, you do the exact same thing.
Yeah. So, again, he got out and he went back in for the same thing. Like, at least get better at stealing pigs.
Right.
I mean,
Change a little something.
come on, man. So, so they blame the guards for his escape. It was an easy thing to do. But in the 19th century, the guards worked 12-hour shifts for 6 days a week, so they were pretty run down. There was a lot of tension between the guards and the inmates, as I'm sure you can imagine.
Mhm.
In 1884, Eastern State Penitentiary saw what it believed to be its first guard murder. So the guard was Michael Doran. He was making his rounds for the night when an inmate named Joseph Taylor came up behind him and started bludgeoning him with a metal bar. So he bludgeoned him to death. When he finished, he walked to his cell, got in bed, and went to sleep. So I watched one of the ghost shows the other day, and he is like one of the ghosts, I think, that they say come back regularly. And I want to say, like, in that episode, they went into his cell, like, supposedly his cell, and there was still blood, like, everywhere,
What?
like stains.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, because it's all concrete,
right.
and so, I don't know, like, I don't know what their I mean, obviously, you just said they work 12-hour shifts for 6 days a week, so, depending on what part of the shift, like, if
Mhm.
the blood is congealed or dried into that concrete and there are cracks and crevices, I mean, you can only wash away so much of that, right?
Which is probably true, yeah.
Yeah, so oh, man, ew, okay, so
But yeah, so he is where the first haunting comes from.
yeah, where the first haunting comes from, people that are in that cell block, they often say that they can hear the guard walking around as well as metal clanking sounds, and those are kinda some of the confessions of the ghost hunters, right? So, by 1877, there was a need for more cell blocks. There were already 7 of them, but they needed more. So, the warden at this time was Michael Cassidy. He was said to be a great warden. Things got a little less strict when he lifted the rules a bit. And he believed that if you treated inmates like humans, that it would do more for their reform than treating them like inmates and putting them through harsh punishments like ice baths and some of the previous forms of punishment that we discussed earlier. But he was the longest serving warden in the prison history. He served from 1881 to 1900. He was also the person to design the new cell blocks. So cell blocks 8 through 11, they were much bigger than the cells in the original blocks. They didn't have the personal exercise yards in the cells. And in the 1880s, cell block 3 was actually converted into a hospital with an x-ray room, an operating room, and eventually separate rooms for inmates suffering from TB or tuberculosis. So the TB rooms had large openings in the back, which were covered with metal grade types of fence so they could get fresh air. Okay, so, like, let's go back to the TB
I
thing.
was gonna
So
say, think about that right now and
so
this time frame.
yeah, so, like, now TB has struck, like, this is like a plague, right? And so this is multiple so first of all, even nowadays, like, one of the TB questions is, like, "Have you been in prison?" Like, "Have you lived somewhere in close quarters with a lot of other people?" Right? So, TB, honestly, I'm surprised it didn't just knock out. I'm surprised they still needed cell blocks after TB ran through the prison, but I mean, people are dying left and right. I can't imagine that they had the proper so nowadays, if somebody has TB or tuberculosis, they go into a negative pressure room, which means it's basically, like, sealed off, and it has a vent that vents air out. So, yeah, they had what did it say? Like, in the back, there was, like,
So there were
a
3 of
metal
them,
yeah.
but yeah, there was a metal grade type of fence, which allowed air to freely flow in and out of those rooms.
Yeah, and so, again, probably and this even happens, like, you can almost compare, COVID to this, like, at one point, like, we were out of rooms in the hospital, and so we shared COVID rooms, so if they only had 3 TB rooms for something that will run as rampant as TB through a place like a prison, then I'm sure those 3 rooms were just absolutely packed with TB patients, and not only with TB patients still trying to survive, but no telling at any given moment how many were actually dead in there, and they didn't know yet,
Mhm.
maybe the people beside them that are still alive are not with it enough to explain to somebody else that this person's dead. Or there's probably, again, like today, a shortage
Mm.
of nursing or hospital staff, and so there's not even enough people to go through those rooms and figure out, you know, who's alive and who's dead. And so this right here, like, this is again a great place, like, why the Eastern State Penitentiary is such an excellent source for a haunting.
For sure.
Because you have probably residual energy, probably some intelligent spirits, but it happened traumatically and it wasn't in a good way. And these people were completely taken out of their element and put into a new element with you're an adult. You're an adult. And now you've been taken somewhere. And not only you're an adult, you're obviously a rebellious adult
Right.
that didn't follow the rules in the first place. And now you've been stuck into this crowded place. And especially during the time of TB where people are sick and you have no outside help.
Terrible treatment.
Yeah, like awful. So, anyways, so they were covered with the metal grate type fence so they could get fresh air. And then in 1911, cell block 12 was completed. It was the first block that was 3 stories high. Instead of skylights, they each had a small window. The ceilings were not arched like the others. By the early 1900s, solitary confinement had actually faded due to overcrowding in the penitentiary,
Mhm.
and they had to use them to put inmates together in the cell. So now they get double rooms. So there were also rooms in the prison that at this point in time were now being used for group classrooms, workshops. This was a place where inmates could work together, they could learn new skills together. They actually earned wages and they could work towards getting their high school diploma. Eventually, they moved on to extracurriculars, so they got baseball fields, basketball courts, and they were able to use these things, and down the line, the inmates actually made their own teams, they played against each other for fun, and then they had an official dining hall that was open in January of 1924 since they were no longer eating in their cells. So this was all built where the old exercise yards used to stand. So unfortunately, there wasn't a whole lot of room in the dining hall because of the way it was built. It was very narrow. It was still a lot of overcrowding to the point that it was a little bit out of hand. And this made it really difficult for the guards to monitor the inmates in the dining hall. And by 1928, there were 1,753 prisoners. So remember, 250 prisoners was the original design. So that's how many people the original design was meant to hold, and now there are over 1,700 prisoners. So, of these inmates, most of them were serving time for major crimes at this point. So, we're talking murder, rape, and it was also a co-ed prison
Yep.
up until the 1920s. So, at that point in the 1920s, at some point in the 1920s, they sent women to another facility. And fun fact, the last female inmate that was taken in there was actually in there for poisoning her husband.
So,
Oh.
now that the original solitary confinement rooms had been used for multiple inmates, they had a need for new solitary confinement cells. So, cell block 13, which was built sometime between 1911 and 1926, became solitary. There were 10 cells in block 13 that were extremely close to each other, and each room was only 4 foot by 8 foot with 8 foot ceilings. So, it was very closed in. There was one single hole in each cell to allow air in the room, but guards were known to occasionally mess with some of the inmates in solitary. They would occasionally turn up the radiator so that the inmates couldn't breathe well, and there was no light whatsoever in any of the solitary confinement cells. They had an iron bed with no mattress, and depending on what the inmates did to get into solitary confinement, they could be in these cells for up to a month at a time.
Gee.
Yeah.
I don't even wanna be in my room for a month at a time.
I mean, that's a long time to be
Yeah.
in one space period, but especially a tiny, tiny dark room.
Yeah, and I really wanna go to my room. Most of the time, but a month at a time, no thank you.
Yeah.
Like, if I sleep in too late in the morning, I'm like, "Oh, I gotta go." Yeah.
So later in 1953, during one of the many investigations into the Eastern State Penitentiary, they were told that these cells were inhumane, to cease the use of them, and that they needed to be destroyed, like, period.
So, is this, like, government investigators?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So in 1959, whenever the final cell block, block 15, was completed, 9 of the 10 cells were destroyed, but they kept one of them.
Hmm.
Mhm.
So at this point, with all the expansions, the prison ground was much like a labyrinth, okay? So it was hard to find your way through. And so again, like, I would imagine there were probably guards there that had never even seen the entire prison.
Agreed. They
Yeah.
only know section that they're assigned to work in.
Right. So again, safety issue. But so cell block 14 was actually designed by one of the prisoners. He had attended Harvard University and it was built by the inmates of the prison. So it was completed in 1924, and underneath it, they had built Klondike cells. So, what are these, right? So, these are specifically built for punishment. So, took away solitary, put in Klondike.
Right.
So, to make it even more daunting, these were built underground. So, they're about the size of a tomb, and I would assume a poor person's tomb. So, probably very small.
Mhm.
And prisoners would be held there for weeks at a time. They were actually discovered during the investigation in 1953, and they were barred from ever using them again. Now, did they actually stop using them?
Probably not.
I guess we'll never know, right? But I would assume, based on the history of them doing all these things they were told not to do, that they probably were.
Yep.
So it's kind of mind blowing. They were never shut down at this point. But you go back and look at all the investigations and all their findings, and like, what? But I guess, it would be hard to find another place for that many inmates to go. So again,
Right.
we're running into a numbers game. Like, we run into this in sports, we run into this in work. This is a life thing. So it's a numbers game. So where are you gonna send these people? Where?
Over
I'm
1,700
gonna
people you would have to
do
find a new home for.
right, like, I'm gonna do whatever the hell I want because what are you gonna do about it?
Mhm.
Right?
You need me more
So
than we need you.
right, exactly. So cell block 14, it became one of the most crowded blocks in the prison, even with having 112 cells. So let's fast forward to 1937. So in 1937, they ended up adding yet another structure to the front of the prison. It was a building added to the front of the prison to heighten security of the prison due to an increase in more violent things happening inside of the prison. So it was where you would have visitations, and I think later on the warden's quarters were actually moved here for safety reasons as well. They had been a prison riot at one point due to low wages. There were stabbings. It was just a necessary addition for, that extra layer of security to be added. The structure had a metal door. It ended up costing about $25,000 to complete, and the metal door could be opened and closed electronically from a control center in the warden's quarters. So One event that probably pushed them to add the metal door was the escape of an inmate by the name of Leo Callahan. So this is where we'll get into some of the inmates and where they were housed there.
Self-care isn't just a luxury, it's a necessity. At Vital Flow Aesthetics and Wellness, they believe in helping you look and feel your absolute best. Whether you're looking for a rejuvenating medical-grade facial, Botox, fillers, or help on your weight loss journey, their expert team is there to enhance your natural beauty with personalized care. Ready to glow from the inside out? Book your appointment today at Vital Flow Aesthetics and Wellness and experience the confidence you deserve. Located inside Tejas Urgent Care in Mejia, Texas. Call or text now to book your appointment at 254-310-7131. Again, that's 254-310-7131.
Okay, so let's get into some of the inmates that were housed at this penitentiary. So Leo Callahan, he was sent to Eastern State Pen for assault and battery with an attempt to kill. By July of 23, Leo decided he was going to try his luck at escaping this inescapable prison. So he was friends with a guy named George Brown, who had been a carpenter prior to arriving at prison, and he's also who designed the 30-foot ladder that he, Leo, and 4 other inmates ended up using to escape. So George had designed the ladder so it would be easily concealed, which you would think would be tricky, right? I mean, how do you hide a 30-foot ladder
Mm-hmm.
in a tiny, tiny cell?
In a cell, yeah.
Some of these people are geniuses, I swear. So basically, he made this ladder in sections, and he made 6 5-foot sections, and he stashed them in the cell somewhere.
Inside of his cell, yes.
And when it came time to use it, it worked.
Mm-hmm.
They put them together, they climbed a wall. They did have to overpower one guard that they came into contact with, and then they ended up climbing the east wall with the ladder that was made by George. And every inmate that escaped with Leo was eventually found and brought back to Eastern State Penitentiary. And then, fun fact, every escape that took place happened via the east wall.
Yeah, that was the easiest to escape from.
Yeah, so they were found in various places. One of them was actually found in Hawaii on the island of Honolulu. The only one that was never found was Leo. So this makes him the only prisoner in Eastern State Pen to successfully escape and remain at large, unless he died.
Well, he may have
I mean,
eventually, but he was the
yeah.
only one they never actually found. Throughout the years, over 100 inmates attempted to escape, and there's one other major escape attempt that we're going to talk about. But first, again, let's talk about the people who were involved. William Francis Sutton, who arrived at Eastern State Pen in 1934 and who was also one of the world's most famous bank robbers. It was said that at one point, whenever asked why he robbed banks, his response was, well, that's where the money is.
Smart guy.
Yeah. He was referenced to as the gentleman bandit because he was always nice to people during robberies, and the actor bandit because he would wear tons of different disguises during robberies. And later in life, many of his robberies were overturned on minor technicalities, and he ended up dying in the 80s outside of Eastern State Pen.
So he was like really smart.
He was pretty smart.
Yeah. So really smart. So another one that was involved was Frederick Tenuto. He worked as a hitman for the mob, and he was known as the Angel of Death.
Ooh.
Yeah. So he came to Eastern State Penitentiary in 1938 after being convicted of murder. Last but not least is Clarence Clendence. Many believe that he was actually the mastermind behind the escape plan. Prior to prison, he was a plasterer and a stonemason, and he ended up in prison for forgery, bribery, and larceny. So he was in cell 68. Prior to it being a cell, it was used for storage, and somehow he convinced the guards and the warden that he would clean the area up and it could be his cell.
So he had more room.
Yeah, so of course, instead of cleaning the cell, he quickly got to figuring out how to build a tunnel, and he and 11 other inmates ended up using this to escape.
And think about that. Wait till you get into it because it's pretty elaborate what all he does.
Yeah, so
or is able to do inside of a prison.
Yeah, so it was a really long process to build the tunnels. It was apparently like a tunnel system, but he was able to hide his work by simply making a plastic mold of his own face that he left in the beds for when the guards made their rounds. He created a panel in the wall that would be easily removed and put back in place. By April of 1945, Clarence, William, Frederick, and 9 of their buddies went through the tunnel, climbed out the other side, and made a successful escape. So the tunnel was 15 foot down, 97 feet out, and there were electrical lights throughout the entire tunnel with fans along the way so that they wouldn't overheat while trying to escape.
So think about how much time it would take to plan that out and then actually dig those tunnels. 97 feet?
Yeah, I know. I can't even dig a hole in the yard for, like, a
Exactly.
plant.
It would be tough.
Yeah. So, there were also some points, like, throughout the tunnel that they were completely underwater, and then there were other parts where the tunnel was only 18 inches wide, and they still made it out.
All of them.
Yes. So, 2 hours after escaping, Clarence ended up right back at Eastern State Penitentiary. They found him 2 blocks away from the prison. William Sutton was the first inmate the police found, and when they found him, he tried to take credit for being the mastermind behind the escape. He even wrote a book about it. So, yeah. James Grace, he was another inmate who escaped with the group, but he just showed back up at Eastern State Penitentiary because he said that life on the run just wasn't for him, and he was hungry. That's me, I'm hungry. And then Frederick, he was found with another inmate named James Bocce Van Sant, and they were the last 2 to be found 2 months later. So these 2 had attempted to escape a few years earlier, and then they were found the very next day. Once everyone had escaped via the tunnel, which was found a whole year later, Frederick, Clarence, and William, they were all transferred to Holmesburg Prison in Philadelphia, and this was a prison that no one had ever escaped from. It's kinda crazy that they would still send all 3 of them together, right? Like,
Instead of splitting all of them up.
so once they got to Holmesburg Prison, Frederick, William, and Clarence, and another friend of theirs named David Aiken actually tried to escape from that prison as well. And during that escape, William Sutton made it to number 1 on the FBI's most wanted list, and eventually he was turned in by a barber named Arnold Schuster. Arnold turned up dead 2 blocks from his home. He had been shot to death, and many people believe that Frederick was responsible because he was never found and never heard from again.
So that's it for today. That's where we're going to leave you with this one. This one was a little bit more of the history, and the next episode, that's going to be more of the hauntings. I'm Ryan Nix.
And this is Brittany.
And this is Pure Malice.